Stupidity is an extension of the safety category, but it is so substantial that it has its own emphasis. To be more specific, stupidity means ignorance, laziness, or selfishness that result in actions that put others in unnecessary danger. These actions exist for each of the three main user categories.
Pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists operate at very different speeds with different desires, different goals, etc. And so we don't really recognize that, I think, enough with our motor vehicle codes and laws.
For motor vehicles, the first serious act of ignorance is occupying bike lanes, either parking in them or turning through one. This not only puts bikers in danger, but undermines the integrity of the lanes themselves, which are supposed to be safe havens.
The green light that lights up for the bicycle to go, people think that's a green light to make a left. And there's been a couple of accidents.
Bike lane or no bike lane, cars will always pose a threat.
I've had some incidents with cabs, but I'm alive, so that's good.
I had a green light, so did cars in opposing direction on a downhill in a dedicated bike lane. But the car was making a left-hand turn, and it looked like they were going to yield to me. They were stopped. Kind of at the last moment, they just decided that they were ready to turn. I tried to stop, and my bike stopped, but I didn't. I was catapulted mostly over the car, but my shoulder caught the hood, and I broke my collarbone in the process.
Some forms of stupidity obviously can't be solved by street design improvement, but others can. The only way to minimize this danger is to have physically separated lanes or stricter enforcement by the traffic police. While these physical separations are being installed in various parts of the city, they can't happen everywhere overnight. However, there is no excuse not to immediately crack down on traffic violations. If parking spaces need to be allocated for delivery trucks during certain times, then so be it. Based on the fact that I myself observe at least one blatant motor vehicle violation every time I ride, I'm confident that they occur often enough to be easily observed by traffic officers. There is no budgetary argument against this effort. Just one single fine per hour would more than pay for the labor of a dedicated officer looking for these infractions. The second serious act of ignorance for motor vehiclists is dooring riders from a parked vehicle. The only way to completely avoid this infraction, aside from eliminating one or the other, is to put a buffer between a parking lane and a bike lane. Bikers on streets that do not have a buffer should keep their distances of at least 3 feet from parked cars in case a surprise door opens. This can also be easily observed and enforced via traffic violations. For bikers, the two main forms of stupidity include riding against the flow of traffic and riding on the sidewalk. In New York and other cities, only children under 12 can ride on the sidewalk, but adults do it all the time.
But the delivery guys don't ride the bike lanes. The messengers don't ride the bike lanes. And they ride up the wrong way.
On biking, the thing that probably pisses me off the most is people that are riding the wrong way down the street, especially if they're in a bike lane.
They should be charged just like motor vehicle people.
The thing is, people obey traffic laws, they don't necessarily obey bike traffic laws, and with some enforcement, maybe we could overcome that.
Simply communicating and enforcing the actual rules of the road for all to see is such a necessary task, but it is currently not done effectively enough. Signs like these should be all over. Additionally, there is the issue of bicyclists running red lights. This is a complicated issue, however, as there is a reasonable and safe way to do this, but only if all cyclists considered red lights as legitimate yield signs and carefully looked both ways before crossing. This is technically illegal in most cities, but has been rarely enforced because it is reasonable for bikers to have this advantage, because frequent unnecessary stops waste valuable momentum and energy for the rider. But when people just blow through the lights without looking or narrowly avoiding cars or pedestrians,
Weaving in and out of traffic.
not only is it dangerous, but it exploits and threatens the unspoken privilege that bikers can take advantage of if it were to be done carefully. For pedestrians, the stupidity comes mainly from running out from between parked cars and occupying bike lanes, including the infamous premature herd crossing an intersection before the white walker light appears, causing cyclists and sometimes cars to come to a screeching halt.
They're stepping out into the bike lane to look and see if cars are coming, and they're not thinking about the fact that there's bikers in the bike lane. I see this all the time. You wouldn't step out if a car was coming. Why would you step out in the street if a bike's coming by? It's no safer.
But regardless of the safety in numbers, pedestrians are still the most vulnerable users of the street. And because every single person, young or old, vigilant or blind, nimble or slow, immediately becomes a pedestrian the second they step outside, special care and consideration must be made for them as the lowest common denominator of users, who happen to be pretty vulnerable. The lack of law enforcement for pedestrian actions can be viewed as somewhat of a privilege, but it can also be viewed as a disservice to their protection. It therefore becomes the responsibility of the pedestrian to govern their own actions, take necessary precautions, and determine their own fate.
When you've got no easy, convenient place to store your bicycle at trip's end, that's a huge barrier.
According to the nonprofit group Transportation Alternatives, lack of secure bike parking is the #1 reason that seasoned cyclists don't bike to work. But that is easy to fix, and many cities have made great strides in bike parking over the past decade. According to Transportation Alternatives, there are more than 6,000 bike racks on New York City streets, with plans to add 5,000 more over the next 3 years. But with only one bike rack for every 30 cyclists, sometimes people need to be creative. The New York City Department of Transportation lists all outdoor bike parking spots, and anybody can request an outdoor rack, assuming it meets city specs, by submitting a location through channels like Fix City. But finding a place to park your bike is only step one. Knowing how to park your bike is something people still struggle with. Having the proper locking components is paramount. If not, it is only a matter of time before your bike gets stolen, or at least part of your bike does. Because of the lack of specificity and police report data, it's hard to know exactly how many thefts occur, but various sources indicate an average of 1 theft per rider per year in New York City. The proper bike lock is either a thick chain or a combination of U-locks. Small cable locks should never be used as primary locks, as it only takes a minute to cut through them. As for locking different parts of your bike, pinheads should be used to avoid losing a seat, a wheel, or even a head post. The safest place to park your bike is to a rack in a locked room. Recently, commuters in New York City have benefited from new legislation this past year requiring all office buildings to provide bike parking either in the building or in another building within 750 feet of the entrance. The Bikes and Buildings law has helped assure work commuters that they will have a safe spot for the entire day. If you don't have bike parking at work, ask your employer or building manager. It's now the law in New York City. But even after this plateau was achieved, there still remains another reservation for some prospective bike commuters, which is the fourth S.